All right, we're back. Welcome back, everybody. Play It Forward. We've got Ashley Garner, who was played it forward by Gemma Fleming. Ashley Garner is a conceptual artist, photographer, and filmmaker. Ashley, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show, and really appreciate you being here. And you're very brave to talk about your video film, because it's a little bit of a departure from what we normally do in terms of short films. And we're going to be talking about sort of the nature of experimental conceptual art. What is it and how does it compare? But first, thank you. Really appreciate you being here. What is a conceptual artist?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I guess, so for me, the way that I describe myself as a conceptual artist, what I'm referring to is that my work is heavily rooted in a very thorough concept. And really, the visual that I end up documenting is less important than the concept. It's kind of the aftermath of coming up with this massive concept. So aesthetics are less important than the thesis paper that I wrote, per se, towards whatever the project may be. So that's where I consider being a conceptual photographer, especially in being photographer, filmmaker, because I do both simultaneously. I'll be shooting a film and doing stills at the same time. But, it's definitely a very muddy industry, photography and film, because of how much commercialization is involved in it, and how many people can be filmmakers, but they're not making narratives. They're making, a commercial, or they're making, at this point, e-commerce, quick bait ads and sponsor videos and whatnot for social media. And same with photography. There's just so many different facets of what it can mean to be, when you say I'm a photographer. Like, are you doing fashion? Are you doing beauty? Are you doing advertising? Are you doing commercial? Are you doing fine art? Are you doing still lifes? Are you doing self-portraits? And then, like, what is your intent with all of these things? Is your intent just to make money and, make visuals for the mass media to sell items for other people? Is your intent something more emotional and personal? Or is your intent something on a broader social, political, activist scale? So when I think about, how do I define myself as a photographer, all of those things are, or as an artist rather, all those things are considered, and I have at this point narrowed it down to conceptual filmmaker, photographer, of what makes sense to describe what I'm doing.
Very cool. Totally get that. So, all right. So did you go to art school?
I went to a public state university, but I did my BFA in art history and photography.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. So, I think you talk about something that every artist faces. It's like, okay, well, most people, I would say 99%, high in the high 90s, start out, wanting to, they find that this is a way that they feel fulfilled, expressing themselves, film, art, writing, whatever it might be, drawing. They have some passion for it. They have some higher experience, right? Like, it brings them to a higher elevated state, and they want to go follow that path and create that kind of work so they can elevate themselves and others. So I think that's, the impetus for most artists initially, and then you have to pay rent and food and this, that, and the other. And so it's like, okay, well, how do I support myself? Because it takes really a lifetime, if you're lucky, quite frequently, to establish yourself as a recognized artist where people are going to pay money to put your shit up on their walls or whatever it might be, right? To decorate their homes, or you're teaching in a university or something like that. So it's like, how do you carve out your path? So I think, it's a fine, delicate, difficult balance, and certainly, there's need for both. You got to make a living somehow, right? And the trick, if you're dedicating your life to being an artist, is, well, how do you structure a life that can support yourself and your family if you have a family, and your children if you have children, and at the same time make art and pursue this higher calling that you may have. So I think it's very common in terms of that struggle, and I think you at least for now are saying, hey, I've chosen really to not pursue the commercial aspects of photography or film, and really focus on the intellectual, aesthetic. Well, really, you're saying that you're prioritizing the intellectual over the aesthetic, right?
Yeah, a lot of the time, like for example, my most recent project that I finished, I spent about a year researching it and then only 6 months shooting it. So just there's more time and energy spent doing the research and laying out the groundwork and the foundation and figuring out what I'm doing, why am I doing it, what does this mean to me, what is this on a larger scale as well, and really asking those questions that, I do appreciate, even though I didn't go to a private art school, I do still consider what my education was as an art school experience. So, you're having to go through that critique and like go up in front of, your entire group of professors and peers and have to, explain to them, why is my work good enough, and why should you care, to be able to graduate and, elevate to the next thesis level.
That's what it's like. I didn't realize that.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's intense. Every 4 months to go up into the next semester, since you don't have tests, pretty much like whatever your work you've been working on, you put it on a wall in a room full of everybody else that, is in that class that semester. Every single person from the art department comes, every single professor and every single student, and they all stand in front of you. And they pretty much, the professors say, so what did you do? You explain what you did. And then they say, why should I care? And then you kind of say, wow, I've never been asked that question of why should you care? And that's a very intense question, because it is literally your soul being ripped apart and throwing it on the table and saying, you should care because I care? I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Spending 4 years having to do that over and over and over and over again really puts you in a certain mindset of what type of work you even make,
That's awesome. And that explains to me, that makes sense to me. It's like why you're so brave. Because I'm like, oh my God, that's like, if somebody was like, oh, dude, Costia, I mean, is this art that you just made this short film? I'd be like, fuck you, man. I mean, like, you don't need to think it's art. I don't, you know what I mean? It's not art to you. Cool. It ain't art,
Well,
whatever.
that's what I found to be a very interesting, concept of your question. And I've been actually talking about it with a few peers of mine of what is, with so many photographers at this point, with advertising in the future of like what we're going to see in the next 10 to 15 years, like anybody that's a photographer, first and foremost, pretty much has to also do motion at this point. Like if you're not doing video or don't know how to do video, you're going to be replaced in the next 10 to 15 years by somebody that knows how to do everything. So from that perspective, I come from a family of artists turned advertisers. So I do have a very intense mindset of understanding the business aspect of where all this is going. But obviously my concerns are clearly more in the personal side of things, of making things like Mermaid Food. But that question of, what happens with art, or something that an artist per se makes, and they intend it to be something, but once it's out in the world, it becomes its own thing. The artist can't stand next to their work next to every single person and say, this is what's happening in this video, and I want you to understand all these like layers and metaphors and this and that. Like at the end of the day, people are going to watch this video or parts of it or whatever, see stills and be like, oh, that's just a model with some seafood on her head, and not bother to read the description or bother to read the caption or anything. And that is something that at that point, art decided by the artist, or is art decided by the audience? And one of my favorite quotes is, the artist destroys the audience. No, the audience destroys the artist until the artist destroys the audience. And that concept of like, as an artist, for me, it took me a very long time to feel comfortable calling myself that title. It took me about 8 years, like, to get to that point and say, okay, I actually do feel like I am this person. Because I never intended for any of this to happen. I wanted to go into the fashion industry and work for magazines. That was the whole goal all throughout art school, was just get to New York and be able to tap into this artistic, sort of like Met's costume gala institute side of the fashion industry. But as fate would have it, I ended up getting a job with an art fair, my first job out of college, and getting wrapped up into this whole art industry with a series of emotional turmoils and ups and downs that led me to create Mermaid Food. I guess take it as you may. For me, when I heard that, what that represented was the artist finally not making work, thinking about the audience. Yeah. And being concerned about that.
Right.
Just not needing that validation to go ahead and make whatever it is you want to make and putting it out there.
And not, I think that's kind of the difference too between like marketing and commercial design and art. I mean, one is very much focused on manipulating the audience or having them feel a certain way. And lots of filmmakers, I've talked to filmmakers that think film is a manipulative medium. They're trying to manipulate the audience. But in my mind, and what I relate to that quote is like, each has to really experience what they're doing individually. And then if it's successful, the two are merged.
Yeah, I completely agree.
One thing, and then we'll get into like more of the standard questions to play it forward. We've got 3 questions. We'll hit those. And I think those will segue nicely into, hey, is Mermaid Food art? One thing I in preparing for this, so I watched the whole video. I had a quote that came to me and last night before our call, and I was like, oh yeah, this is really, I think, significant. And it's a Lawrence Ferlinghetti poem. And he was like a beat dude, hung with Kerouac and all that. And he wrote this poem about, it's called, for some reason, I'm not sure why it's called, there's a number 15 after it, but it's Constantly Risking Absurdity is the title of the poem. Constantly Risking Absurdity. And he talks about the poet slash, artist is someone who has to constantly risk absurdity. In the very first few lines of it, constantly risking absurdity and death whenever he performs above the heads of his audience. The poet, like an acrobat, climbs on rhyme to a high wire of his own making. So, and it continues, but I think this idea of constantly risking absurdity, having to go out to that place of the unknown and bring back value and interpretation and a known to evolve and elevate is what art has to risk. So I certainly think, you're risking absurdity here, so you're going out on that limb and I think doing your work. I think that the question is have you constructed, at least in my mind, have you constructed a piece of art, whether it's a film or performance art, that can engage the intellect and the emotion and take that on a journey to where they start at one place and then they end in another place, and they're able to take that and reflect back on their own lives and make more meaning?
Yep. I don't know if that's really a question, I guess. Is that like towards Mermaid Food?
What do you think of that? I mean, is that what you're trying to do? I mean, is that what you want to do? Do you agree? Do you think, well, no?
I do agree that is a goal for a lot of art, and especially for filmmaking, of, an evolving narrative. I don't think that's necessarily always the goal also, though, because sometimes you're just asking a question. You're not really leading to an answer, and you're not really looking for an answer. You're just proposing a question or a thought, and that's kind of it. You just have this open-ended thought, and you're like, hey guys, what do you think? Or how do you feel about this? And I'm not really proposing an answer. I mean, a great example is Kara Walker right now and everything that's going on with Kara Walker saying that she shouldn't be, like, as the most famous Black artist in America, she is being asked all these questions about her thoughts on, Charlottesville and Black Lives Matter. And a lot of her work has dealt with talking about racism and talking about being an African-American woman in America and the experience of that. But now here she is, like in this very heated political climate we're in the US. She's being asked these questions because she is an artist that has made work in related to these, situations. And so people are asking what her thoughts are. And she has come out recently, finally, with a quote saying, "That's not my responsibility to have the answers." And it's that her particular situation obviously goes in different directions, but that idea of, is it the artist's responsibility to provide an answer? Or in this particular situation of Mermaid Food, I wouldn't say I was trying to lead you to an end result. I was just really opening up a vein of my own personal experience and telling it through the metaphor of mermaids and mythology to really just express an emotion and a moment that I had in life. But the end result is not an answer. I'm not trying to have an answer. It's just an emotion, purely for this particular thing. And though I never came out and, said what the inspiration was of, like, ever when I put out Mermaid Food, I never explained, oh, I went through, a really bad breakup and this is about my ex-boyfriend. Because I think that by having that metaphor of the mermaids, especially the mermaids, their whole story represents that, of that heartache and pain. And when you read the little bio I wrote about this, was this concept of they sing this song together because they're actually heartbroken because their love is at the bottom of the ocean, which was Icarus. And they're just begging the gods to make them mortal so they can finally die and be with their, long lost love. So for me, the mermaids represented this moment that I was going through. And it's been really enlightening that, and I just put it out there solely for my own personal therapy. And I thought it was beautiful, and I thought people might enjoy it as well, just visually. And then it turned out a lot of people started sending me messages and saying that, seeing these photos and like watching this film was helping them release these really, deep-rooted, painful emotions that they didn't know how to release until they saw this visual that helped them do that. And it was really interesting that they were telling me that the experiences that they were going through, the emotions they were letting out, were exactly what I was personally going through, but not actually putting in my caption, not putting in my, social media outlet of like, this is what this is about. I was just putting, here's some pictures of Mermaid Food, period, done. And everybody was responding to it exactly through the same vein that I was creating it. So it became my, by internalizing my own emotions and externalizing them, and, just like really being as vulnerable as possible through my artwork, it was able to help other people, deal with their own turmoils. So that was really what the result of Mermaid Food has been, and what it was created in the vein of.
Well, I guess that's very cool. And I think you may have answered the first two questions, which are why did you make it and what did you want to say?
Yeah, so I made it because I was going through a very difficult breakup and hanging out at the Chinatown fish market a lot, because the blood and guts and carnal aspect of it just was really beautiful to me, and it really seemed to represent what I was feeling at that time. And I
just like actually actively sought out to go to the Chinatown fish market for that.
Well, I was just I was just at the time I was experimenting with still life. So I was changing up my entire photography style, going from fashion photography into, I didn't have the means to, I didn't want to work with a lot of people anymore the way that you need to on a fashion shoot. And I didn't want, and I didn't have the budget to be able to produce these, massive shoots either. So I decided to start experimenting with still life photography. And so, consistently going out and just searching for props in weird and random places. And that eventually leads you to the fish market.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a great spot. And then I guess in terms of what did you want to say, is there anything more than it just being like a cathartic experience for you for what you were going through at the time?
No, I think that really does sum it up. All of the girls that were casted are friends of mine. I knew personally, I've known for years. They're not random models that I casted. So all of them also got to see and go through, what that breakup entailed. And so they really understood what I was going through as well. And when I asked them if they would be willing to, you know, roll around in some fish and blood for me, and, you know, pretend, you know, to be these characters, they also were able to capture that emotion purely and genuinely and authentically, because they were able to literally see the whole breakup go down
Yeah.
and get where that was coming from.
So how long did it take to shoot?
Each girl, we did about like 3 to 5 setups for each girl, of different, you know, still lifes, and then probably about 3 hours of shooting for each person. So, but we would shoot, the way we organized everything too, because of the fish, was we would do 2 shoots in a weekend. So body of fish and stuff, and shoot everybody, or shoot the girl one day and then have another girl book the next day to use the same fish, because when it got all mixed up with the pomegranates and dirt and other things on the table, it would change colors and texture and everything completely. So you were able to recycle the fish, and it worked out too. Also, like so the person who made the audio for Mermaid Food is my friend who I went to college with, Orestes de la Paz, who's a sound engineer and performance artist. But he did something really interesting with the audio where so there are 6 chapters, 6 girls.
Uh-huh.
And depending on how it were to be viewed, if you just viewed it from beginning to end, the way I have it on my Vimeo, it all is a cohesive, you know, orchestrated, you know, audio. But if you were to play all 6 videos in a room at exactly the same time, there are moments where all of the songs will sync up together, and then they'll go back off into their own, to represent that they are all their own individuals going through their experiences, but they're also a part of this clan. They're a part of this, you know, experience together. Which I think, like, the fact that he did that, and that was not a discussion we had to have, and just, I love that too about working with other people on films and such, is like letting each person, you know, you have this concept, you create this structure of what you want this film to be, and like what you want it to represent and emote, but then you have to let each person be their own artist, you know, in the experience. Like you have to let the models do, or actors, or whoever you're working with, you know, play their character and take it in whatever directions they, and have the, you know, sound engineer do the same thing, and have the makeup artist do another thing, and the set, you know, well, I don't work with a set designer, but if you were to, each person, I think it's so important.
Yeah.
But,
Absolutely. That's what makes it a collaborative, you know, project that is really unique. I mean, film is really unique in that way. Like, I mean, music, you know, like in a band or whatever. But it is an orchestrated event, and it is an event. It's like an orchestrated artistic event. And when you have a collaborator, you know, it's a team working at their and contributing, you know, their own creative vitality to it. That's, you know, it definitely takes it to the next level. So what did you want to say? No, sorry. What changed? That's the last question. What changed after making it for you?
Oh God, everything. This was absolutely like making Mermaid Food, and then seeing, because once I put out Mermaid Food, you know, like I said, I was doing fashion photography at the time, and with, you know, that entire industry of things, because no need to explain why, who isn't fed up with it. And just really, you know, I had left my job. I was, you know, going through this, you know, 6 months of a breakup really situation where you're just like watching it deteriorate in front of you while you're still in the relationship.
That's the worst.
That's Mermaid Food. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was just really in this, you know, sort of like crossroads of life, like, you know, situation. And when I made Mermaid Food, that was this decision that I was definitely not interested in trying to please the industry anymore, not interested in trying to please the business side of the art industry, or which is the commercial side of the art industry, of course, or the fashion industry or the beauty industry, or any of these people that I had pretty much spent the past, you know, 6 years trying to appease, you know, in school, and trying to get into these facets of the market, and making Mermaid Food, and then putting it out on my social media, just ostracizing everybody, really.
Putting what out?
Of what I was saying I cared about. Putting like the photos and the videos of Mermaid Food out on my social media, where like my audience. of whatever the audience was at the time. And then like seeing the response, because of course, like, you know, after you're putting out fashion photography for 4 or 5 years, and then you suddenly put out pictures of, you know, this, definitely your audience is very confused about what's going on.
So did you ostracize them, or was that were you afraid of doing that?
No, I did
Oh, you
ostracize
did?
them.
Oh.
I just did it wholeheartedly, saying, I do not care about doing fashion photography anymore. This is what I want to do. Take pictures of, you know, fish heads and blood and,
Yeah.
you know, intestines and black Caravaggio moody lighting that makes you feel really, you know, like enchanted by it, but like extremely disgusted at the same time. Like it's so terrible, but you don't want to look away. But once I put out Mermaid Food on my social media, and I started getting these messages from people that were saying, you know, literally people would send me messages saying, thank you for making this. And that was really powerful. Just the fact that people I didn't know felt the need or felt inclined enough to want to send me a message just to say thank you for putting these pictures out there and these videos out there, because it was helping them.
That's awesome.
And so that pretty much, one, made me feel like, oh, I feel like an artist now. Like this is what this feeling is. You know, fashion photography never made me feel fulfilled in this way. And from people saying, thank you so much for, you know, photographing this girl in this beautiful dress with like a mediocre lighting situation. So that was just really powerful. And so after Mermaid Food and just realizing that, that side of what art making and creation can be and feel like, and result in, that just changed everything in terms of the type of work that I was even interested in making. And so ever since then, it has been, that's when I, you know, came up with the title of I'm a conceptual photographer and filmmaker. I'm much more interested in making work that for me is fulfilling rather than feeling the need to have to make money making my work. You know, I'm lucky enough to have a day job that also is in the art industry. So I have, you know, a steady income and a way to pay rent and have that sort of stability, so that I do have the freedom to go and make whatever it is I feel I need to make. At the moment, it happens to be work that is rooted in mythology and spirituality and technology and science. But Mermaid Food was a big turning point of what even I felt my life's mission was, in a lot of ways.
That's awesome. And you know, so I want to ask you, when you got that feedback from you know, people, and they were like, yeah, this is awesome, thank you for making this, I resonate with this helped me, and you said you felt like an artist. What did that feel like?
It felt like I had finally found the words to describe myself. You know, I think a lot of us, you know, like all of us, really more or less, we spend our life figuring out what it is we like, what we don't like, who we don't like, and then, you know, figuring out like, oh, this is who I am. And then you kind of spend the rest of your life trying to figure out the words to describe who that person is. Like, you know who it is, you have no problem understanding who you are, but to describe that to other people sometimes can be conflicting or just confusing, even though you very innately know who that is, without just knowing the language for it yet, or knowing, you know, the proper sentence structure to describe it. And once I had that breakthrough with Mermaid Food, and I made work that made me even, you know, like some of those photos from Mermaid Food, I can't even look at to this day because they just, you know, really, you know, pull my heartstrings. And that feeling of just feeling like, oh, this is what, you know, all of those other things I was doing was leading up to. And yeah, it's just, it's a sense of fulfillment. It's a sense of mission. It's a sense of, you know, lifting a veil and feeling like your eyes are wide open, and just that the puzzle pieces have, you know, started to match up.
Well,
And
that's
it's exciting.
feeling.
It's terrifying and it's exciting. More exciting than terrifying, but definitely a little scary once you know what it is and you're like, oh shit, now I know what it is. Yeah, now I have the rest of my life to do this. So what is that going to lead to?
Right. And you clearly, I mean, that's what courage is, right? Is feeling fear and doing it anyway. So, you know, I really honor your courage for going the route you did in terms of your life and prioritizing your values for fulfillment in a deeper way than just material. And that's not easy, and that takes a lot of courage. And having the courage to go on the show and really explore this piece in a way with somebody you don't know and see, hey, is this really art? And takes a lot of courage. And I definitely honor that. And I think, I've learned something from this show. And I think, for me, what I've learned is that the emotional, you expressed yourself in an emotionally honest way about something that was very deep and personal to you. And I think my difficulty in appreciating it was that I think the form of expression was I couldn't access it. I certainly know what heartbreak feels like, and on the same level that, or very similar to what you may have experienced. And I mean, ultimately, you are in love with somebody, doesn't work out, you go your separate ways. But, and the torture of what that feels like. And then you have whatever might be on top of that, whether it was betrayal or this or that, or whatever ugliness, led to it, or just, incompatibility. But I think, your depiction of it is a very conceptual feminist, in my opinion, visualization of it. And I think in my experience in this, body and being a male, and I couldn't really get that. I understood yeah, look, it's suffering women going through, and I have a general sense of mermaids, and that they are I didn't realize that they were kicked basically out of the heavens. They lost their love, and I knew they were, responsible for leading sailors to their deaths. But so I didn't have that background either. And I think, what I'm looking for, what I think in terms of scalability, right? So how do you scale this experience in a way that it can reach a broader audience? And I think if you were to think about that, or if I'm to think about it, it's kind of well, how do you make it accessible? And I think that's what narratives do. I think narratives say, hey, here's an individual, you can connect with their beginning, middle, end, conflict resolution trajectory. And here I was thrown into I don't really understand where I'm at exactly. There's this kind of conceptual framework that's behind it, but it's not really a part of it. You know what I mean? So I think it was a matter of accessibility. And now that I've had a talk with you, and I've gotten to know you better, and to know you at all, and then I see who you are, and I'm impressed by your character. And then when I'm impressed by your character, and then I look at this art, then I'm yeah, I see this art in a different way. So that's my experience of it, for whatever it's worth.
Oh, I love it. It's actually, it's very insightful. And, it's funny that you say that about how, how to use, as a filmmaker, as a creator, reach a broader audience. And, obviously, as I explained, the creation of Mermaid Food was not concerned about an audience at all. It was just, for myself, truly. And then I put it out, and the audience ended up, as it turns out. But definitely for, the work that I've made now, because Mermaid Food is about 2 years old now. And the work that I've made since then, and, what my current project is absolutely concerned about the audience, and is absolutely concerned about how can you reach a broader market. I'm not, the current work is not necessarily about a narrative, but it is asking those questions, and it is making that a top priority of the creation of the film, of, okay, how, who is our audience? How are we going to reach them? What are the different places we can show it? What are the different ways we can, visualize it and tell this story that is trying to have, this conceptual conversation. But yeah, for Mermaid Food, it was not that concern. And I think also for, for living in New York, and meeting other artists, I think that because I tend to show my work in, places more attuned to the galleries or museums or, of that facet of the public audience of who I'm kind of reaching out to. It's many people who make work just because. And that is kind of, for me, sad, because I feel like there's a lot of lack of playing anymore in the art world or in the creation world. You see a lot of playing happening in school and in art schools and whatnot, because you have that freedom to do that. But I feel like so many people, once they get out of school, they become so concerned about, how are they going to make money through their creative, facets, or what is their reputation going to be, and like what kind of clients are they going to have, and whatnot, and that people forget to allow themselves to really just make something just because you feel like it. Don't be worried about the audience. Don't be thinking about like the different people that you're going to have to reach out to and whatnot. You really do, I think, as an artist, as a creator, you do need to allow yourself to have that time in your life, because you have no idea what's going to come out of it and like what discoveries are going to happen when you go into that, dark ether of world, and then come back and maybe have something that you had no idea you even wanted to make. That can lead to a huge breakthrough that you didn't know you were going to have or wanted to have.
100%.
So,
that's where it starts, right?
Exactly.
It's your connection with your, the mystery of whatever it is that you believe or want to believe in or don't believe in, or whatever it might be, but that darkest place of inspiration, and that dance with whatever it is, and vulnerability, and letting yourself go to that unknown is where you're able to be informed by it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
I think that's really kind of the role of, what Ferlinghetti was talking about, risking absurdity. It's almost like the role of a spiritual leader. It's to go out there and to go out into that edge of, between physical and transcendent, and to negotiate that understanding, whether that's, psychosocial or psychospiritual or, metaphysical, whatever it might be. But,
Mm-hmm.
We're all limited to words and language and the physical reality, but there's something going on, regardless of our beliefs, that function on a level that's deeper than that. And I think that's the role of the artist, is to help us to understand ourselves and our experience better.
Yeah, I could not agree more.
Cool. Ashley Garner, thank you so much for being on this episode of Play It Forward. Really respect what you're doing and your courage, and keep on doing it. And I look forward to more good things to come. Please let us know what's up.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Ashley. Great job.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in this week. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and leave us a like and or a comment. It makes a big difference. Play It Forward is brought to you by Digipops, where we're building a community to put film and filmmaker discovery in your hands. Here, filmmakers and fans, the creative class, recognizes each other fairly and transparently through a community-curated film festival each quarter. It's coming soon. Thank you.